Good morning. Good morning.
What's up, everybody? Morning Deuce. The ride is coming to an end for me at my current job. I'm going to be a professional deucer coming up very soon. Only 2 days left. It is Thursday. We are going to start by talking about Johnny Suction Cups, the guy who decided to scale Trump Tower and just hijacked the internet and television for like 4 hours today. It wasn't 4 hours quite, but it was probably that much. I mean, if you include the press conferences and everything afterwards, his intention to climb up the Trump Tower, and then people eventually found out that he released a YouTube video, which was the scariest thing I've seen that wasn't scary in a long time. He looked like a dashboard confessional groupie, like uber emo-tastic. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was like, you could see like 20% of his face off to the side. He's a Trump supporter, which I did not expect. I thought he was going to get to the top of this tower after suction cupping, or like getting up as high as he could. I thought Batman was like going to swoop in and take him. It was that weird, but I thought he was going to get most of the way up and then literally open his bag and just throw out like weird anti-Trump propaganda. Like I thought it was going to be like Banksy, that artist who made all the counterfeit British money and then threw it out, but turns out people were using it, so then he felt really bad. It was going to be like a scenario where this guy does all this just to get attention, throws out all this anti-Trump stuff. Turns out he said, according to this YouTube video and what he was telling the cops, he had no negative intentions. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted to meet Donald Trump. He was an independent journalist and like some type of entrepreneur, or some type of, not entrepreneur, but he had an independent venture. And he knew he couldn't get Donald Trump by regular channels, so he was doing this to draw attention to him, hoping that Donald Trump would meet with him. Now he's getting psychologically evaluated. It's a pretty extreme way. I mean, this is a classic go viral move. It's like, I need to capitalize on this. What should I do? How to get on national television on every station for 4 hours in a row. I know. Be Johnny Suction Cups and just try to get up this tower. He made it pretty high, like 20-something stories. But there's no way you were going to win. I mean, it's a glass tower. Like, they can just take out the glass above and below you and just isolate you. I was surprised they didn't pull one of those old school things with, like, Sean William Scott and Will Ferrell, where they hit him with the blowtorch, with the rhino trank. And it's like, push. And like, you just got hit with full horse of rhino trank, or whatever he says. And he's like, you're freaking out, man, and whatever he says. I'm definitely mixing the lines with Super Troopers, but you get the idea. And he falls in the pool, and they play Sound of Silence. I thought they were just going to suction cup. The suction cup guy, they were just going to rhino trank him, and he was just going to slump down and just be like hanging there like in a weird cradle on this glass thing, totally just subdued by the trank, and then they would bring him in. But there was a press conference afterwards, so he stole all the highlights. And the dude who pulled him in off the press conference is not to be trifled with. This looked like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's stunt double. I mean, that was what the cop looked like who pulled him in off the tower. So much props to that dude. Weirdly eventful Wednesday. Just because that was not the event I was expecting, and it was the biggest story in the country. I'm excited for the presidential debates. We got an interview coming out tomorrow with 3 journalists who went to the RNC and the DNC, trying to give you a little behind the scenes of what it was like to travel and cover those events as a media member, maybe what you wouldn't have seen on TV, and just, some of the emotions from within the building, a little bit of a different look. But I'm excited for the debates because I just want to see how weird it can get. And I know that's dumb, but with arguably the 2 most unlikable candidates, I think, in like 50 or 60 years for presidential nominees, everyone is polarized. You either like one person or hate. You either like or hate each of them. There's no one who's like, oh, Hillary's okay. Like, most people are like, I love Hillary, or I hate Hillary, or just like, I hate her but not as much as him, and I hate them both. And it's the same with Trump. I love Trump, I hate Trump but not as much as Hillary. and that's it. So I don't know how much the debates will be swaying anyone's opinions. It's not like the Republican debates with 15 candidates, or even the early Democratic debates where people were looking to put their opinions behind someone. No one's looking to put their opinions behind anyone anymore. I think at this point we're just kind of in it for entertainment value, that it's just going to be an insult parade, and it's just going to be who gets caught in the Twitter echo chamber. Like, oh, who made a good enough statement that it will just like reverberate around Twitter in 140 characters, so people who don't watch it can see the 10-second Vine and talk to their coworkers at the water cooler about how Trump roasted Hillary because of this and said crooked Hillary 17 times in the debate, and Hillary roasted Trump because of this, because of blah, 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 blah. It's going to be weird to have Donald Trump in a single debate field. I think that's almost harder for him. He does so well just like having everyone try to launch at him and then playing the field against themselves and then just like perfectly choosing when to interject into other people's points. I think it's going to be harder one-on-one. I think he's going to go after the party at large. It's probably his best shot. But anyway, this interview tomorrow is cool. You should check it out. Either way, yeah, you're definitely getting eyeballs on you when someone decides to make a YouTube video to meet with you and then suction cup climbs your tower to get inside. Which, that sounds so medieval, like I'm running for king of the country and I'm sitting atop my ivory tower and the only way for you to get up is to just climb my wall. That's crazy. Also, do you think Donald Trump has like food testers to make sure people don't poison him? I would. I'd be doing like the weird, crazy like drug dealer, like Pablo Escobar stuff where I'm like insisting that everyone's out to get me and I have like 3 people I trust and I make them do everything. Like they start the car before I get inside it so it doesn't explode. I mean, there has to be a level of fear when you get to be that polarizingly unliked and liked at the same time. There has to be a level of fear that like, I mean, I know you have great security, and that was the topic of the interview about how good the security was at the RNC. But there has to be that weird fear that, like, you know, like there's a lot of people with guns and bad intentions and knives and bad intentions and money and bad intentions. I feel like it gets a little, you have to be pretty ballsy eventually and maybe even a little insane to carry out this presidential thing this far. I mean, that's nuts. Once you're president, at least you have, like, you know, the White House and the military and everything's staked out. But at this point in the game, things are a little different still, for sure. So, debate should be interesting. I wonder if Johnny Suction Cup is going to get that meeting with Donald Trump. I mean, if you're Trump, do you meet with him? It's kind of a weird double-edged sword. If you meet with him, it's like, oh, Donald Trump will just meet with the craziest people. Like, if you do anything absurd, you can meet with Donald Trump, and then you're opening up a huge can of worms. But you do kind of want to know what he has to say. I mean, I kind of not want to know what's so important. Like he said, I promise you it's important because I'm risking my life to do it. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't important. Well, what's so important that this guy's suction cupping, like, you know, 20-something stories, 30 stories into the air with a backpack on? Something was weird. I kind of want to know what he had to say. Even if Donald Trump doesn't do it, you got to get somebody within your campaign to try to break him. And you know he's going to be like, I'm not telling anyone but Donald Trump. You got to get someone to break him so we can figure out what he wanted and get that shit leaked, because that's interesting. All right, part 2, we're going Olympics. Lot going on in the Olympic world. We had the Lily King breaststroke win over the Russian girl who was suspended once for doping, passed doping again, or was caught doping again, and they let go of her sentencing for no apparent reason. And she's been super adamant about anti-drugs, which is great in a lot of ways, but kind of crappy in a lot of other ways. And then we had Michael Phelps and Chad Leclos and the whole shadow boxing thing that set the internet world on fire. Michael Phelps is more dialed in for this Olympics than even the last Olympics. I watched the last Olympics extremely intently, and you could tell, you know, he'd taken some time after Beijing, and he was kind of doing this because he felt like he should, and he was going to be the most decorated of all time. This Olympics, he honestly looks like he just wants to win. He wants to show everyone that he still can. He wants to do it. I mean, he's crushing. He's executing his game plans impeccably. which is cool. I mean, it's exciting to watch someone who's the greatest at their sport in the world do the best at their sport in the world. I think the whole drug thing, it opens a ton of cans of worms. The Olympic Committee, just like FIFA, they're super corrupt. I think people forget, we want to think of the sanctity of sports. And at one point in time, the Olympics were about the sanctity of sports and competition. But, they, like so many things, education was about the sanctity of, educating a populace and getting a populace better. But now it's just kind of a for-profit business that we mask with education in a lot of ways. I mean, the student loan crisis is crazy because we're masking what education is. In a lot of ways, war is industrial militarized complex. It's like we've figured out how to make money off war, that now we're just trying to continue to let people have reason to be at war and to be developing military equipment and creating tanks and deploying people. It's like just more of a profitable way to continue to use our resources. And that's what sports are eventually. I mean, how does Qatar, one of the worst human rights places on the planet, get the bid for the FIFA World Cup? Well, because they paid people off. I mean, we have judges every year who make backdoor agreements. There was a huge one a while back where like a judge purposely scored poorly, and it was because they had made an agreement with a different judge to score better in another grouping so each of their country could get victories. I mean, it's just nationalistic pride. And that's what happens. Sometimes you see with poor athletes driven to steroids and stuff, people who feel like, they're one shot, they're starting to slip, and they're one shot of getting out of a life of, lower class, horrible, less than mediocrity, is to take steroids, so they can be faster, stronger, do everything they got to do. Friday Night Lights did a great job with it, with the running back who feels like he's, holding the weight of his family, and he's got to get a little bigger and a little faster and a little stronger. It's that easy sometimes. And then on a country level, it's like, well, Russia's so built on national pride. It's a huge part of their identity. They have to, in a lot of ways, keep winning things to keep up their motif, of how great and important their country is by athletic dominance. So it's, they're the one where the president of their country is playing in a hockey game and scoring a bunch of goals that people are purposely letting go through so he can show his dominance in sports. It's not surprised that they're getting banned for institutionalized use of steroids. They're pushing above every limitation they can. And the thing is, testing is always behind the drugs. There's a great 30 for 30 about a sprinter from Canada. I think his first name was Ben. I totally forget his name. But the 30 for 30, those ESPN films, you can find them on Netflix. It's about him and drugs and getting suspended. And it happens. Marion Jones did it too. These people, they will do nothing to not be at the top of their game. And they go from hero to the worst. Lance Armstrong was revered across the United States. Everyone wore a Livestrong bracelet. And now he's just a mess and a fraud. And it's people who are willing to cut corners. And it's really sad that they're pushed to that level. But until they're found to be caught, we throw so much money behind them because there's opportunities to make money. And that's really what that's about. But the documentary does a good job of saying that there's Olympians. They were shocked because they would keep testing results. So in the Olympics, I think it was like 1986, I want to say, which I think was Spain. But anyway, the Olympics, they have all the testing vials, and all these people pass. And then 4 years later, when they improve testing, they test again. And the ratio, the scientists would say they couldn't release that testing data. They didn't have the rights to. When they would test 4 years later, old samples from the previous Olympics, it was astounding to them how many people would test positive that hadn't 4 years before because, the methods they were doing and the masking methods are just ahead of the testing. You create the test to catch the drug. You create the test to figure out if someone's masking something. And that's a big problem with sports. And it goes beyond. One of the best things about smaller countries is that their athlete programs are so professionalized that every piece of pill or whatever, medicine, multivitamin, whatever product they take, and I think 94% of Olympians take some type of supplement, and whatever they take is perfectly found out on every ratio to be under the levels required for them to do that. But in the United States, a lot of these shock putters that see in the Home Depot commercials that went to college and did this, and they spent a lot of their own money perfecting their craft. It's not like they have nutritionists. It's not like they have brilliant people. They have to follow the rules on their own. They have to go above and beyond and know every single one of the rules and everything they're taking and putting in their body in all the right ratios. And then all the supplements they take from GNC, the facts on the back are just measured out over a huge batch. So out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cans, that's the ratio. But you could get a bad can from a bad batch that tilts everything the wrong way. I mean, there's vitamin waters that can tilt drug tests the wrong way in the NCAA. And that's not even the Olympics. So the process is very strange. It's weird. It's weird to think that all of these athletes take these supplements. They're supposed to help get ahead, but they're towing this line that's always a gray area. And everyone's always trying to figure out, well, how can I eat better, perform better, practice better, do something better than the other athletes to get an edge, but not cross this line? Everyone's trying to take a supplement that might not be banned yet, or try to figure out an alternative way to get the most out of themselves, from a medical standpoint, from a process that's not banned yet. Blood doping was illegal, right? Blood doping. Because when you're at high altitudes, the oxygen cells in your blood, the red blood cells, they hold more oxygen. It's easier for you to do things longer, which is a big issue in certain sports like soccer. Blood doping was a problem in soccer because people needed to run for forever. So blood doping is a huge problem, right? People do transfusions of their own blood so that they have it with more oxygen, receptive blood cells. Well, that's illegal. But Michael Phelps, he sleeps in a gigantic cryogenic tube thing that he sets an altitude when he sleeps to 10,000 or higher elevation, so that his body spends a majority of more than a third of each day sleeping at a high altitude to develop those blood cells naturally. So basically he's doing the same thing. He's stimulating his body and his blood, and he's not the only swimmer who does it, but he's stimulating himself to create that physiological response that other athletes used to do illegally, but used to do the same thing by just going to those places and doing blood transfusions. The marathon runners train in mountains in California because they get heat and they get humidity and they get altitude, and that translates over. That's what they do to create the natural effect of it. Someone who trains in a place that's maybe less warm, less strenuous, less altitude, they come into a more difficult circumstance when they compete. So trying to find this line within the gray area is always something sports is trying to do. Who can get ahead with a technique without pushing over a line? I think that's part of what sports is. The problem is when you just blatantly disregard the line. Like Manny Ramirez towards the end of his baseball career. He didn't care. He was doing things and being like, oh, it's fertility cycle drugs, such and such. He didn't even care at that point, just blatant disregard. Ryan Braun has had moments of blatant disregard, another baseball player. Baseball was obviously a sport with a huge problem with it. But there's been plenty of athletes. I think that's the problem that Lily King had with this Russian swimmer, is that she already served a huge suspension and then came back, tested again, and won her appeal by being like, I already served my time for this. But it was a new suspension. It was a new test positive. But the sport and the federation didn't want to lose her race. So that's a problem, because it seemed like this person knowingly was going beyond that gray line. And that's the fly too close to the sun effect. If we're constantly seeking to see how close we can press that level of what's illegal and what's not legal and how to get an advantage, there's going to be times we cross it. But if you're blatantly choosing to cross it, it's a whole different thing. Anyway, I digress, but the Olympics are awesome. I always love the swim meets, and this is a special day for me, August 11th, because it's my favorite Olympic moment of all time. And it's from a guy that no one probably knows named Jason Lezak, who is an American. He was one of the older guys on the American swim team in 2008. And he was the last person to jump into the 4x100 freestyle Olympics. And to that final heat, he was the anchor relay leg. He dove in, and he was behind. And the way this story is so important was because Michael Phelps was going for 8 gold medals in one Olympics, which would have been the greatest Olympic feat of all time, right? The greatest individual Olympics. And 2 races for him were the biggest question marks. One was the 100 butterfly, which he won by 100th of a second with a little help from the timing machines. And that one, he actually probably had a little bit of an advantage going in. He probably should have, arguably won by even more. Had a good shot at that. But the 4x100 relay, the United States should not have won. I mean, when you add up all the times of these swimmers and how they had done their best, even if they all outperformed their best, they were still in a situation where they more than likely would lose to France. France had 2 of the best sprinters in the world record holders, people that were just performing at the height of their abilities, and they were just absolutely on top of their game. And so Michael Phelps jumps into the pool first, and I'll play the call at the end of this. He jumps into the pool first, and he gets the team a lead and has a great swim for his first 100. But it takes all 4 members. The next 2 members jump in, and by the time the third leg is done, Jason Lezak, the final American leg, is diving in behind Alain Bernard, who was the world record holder in the event, the fastest freestyler in the world at that distance. And Jason Lezak had never, I don't think, been under 47 and a half seconds. And he went 46 seconds, which a second and a half in 100 freestyle is an amazing thing. I mean, that's like a hitter who's had 3 home runs all of a sudden just hits 3 in a game. I mean, it's an unbelievable feat in the biggest moment at an event like that. It's really just unreal to have a swim like that in that moment. And he caught the French swimmer from behind on the last leg by swimming the most unbelievable thing. And that's really a mind over matter moment, because he jumped in and it was bigger than him. It was bigger than, his swim. He jumped in and said, for my country and for this guy, in order for him to have the best Olympics ever, I have to jump in and do something I've never, ever done before, and something that's almost completely impossible for me to do, which is catch up to this guy who's already ahead of me, a world record holder in the event, and swimming at the top of his level. And he never had a swim like that again. He saved his one best moment for what was his biggest athletic moment in his career. And I'm going to leave the Morning Deuce with just the very end call of that 2008 4x100 relay, which you should look up. You should look up because it's it'll get you jacked up. It'll make you feel that USA. And that happened in August 11th, 8 years ago, 2008, helping Michael Phelps win his 8 gold medals in one Olympics. So there it is, Morning Deuce. Later. Hashtag tell your hot friends.
The men's 4x100 freestyle relay. The United States set the world record in the prelims with guys that weren't on the first team. Now they've got the A team out there, led by Michael Phelps, who is going for gold medal number 2 at these games. The Americans have to win gold in here if Phelps is to keep his hopes alive of surpassing Mark Spitz in the greatest Olympics ever, when Spitz won 7 gold medals. And there is the French team there. They are the favorites, and they have been doing some talking. Alain Bernard, their world record holder in the 100 free, earlier told a newspaper, what about the Americans? We're going to smash them. That's what we came here for. That article has been looked at by the Americans for extra inspiration, Rowdy, but it's going to take a lot, realistic realistically for the United States to outtouch France?
How many times have I broken this down, Dan, over the last 2 weeks? Every time I do it, it comes out France. And, you know, the Americans are certainly capable of doing it, but each one of them, it's just sort of like the American women we saw last night. They each have to have the perfect race to be able to beat the French.
All these teams are. Garrett Weber-Gale has the lead for the United States. What is it going to take down the stretch of this race for the Americans to have a chance in the end with France?
The problem is Bousquet for France was 46.6 in the prelims, and then you've got Bernard, the former world record holder now. They've got to get out there way ahead. Cullen Jones probably the slowest leg of the four. He earned that spot to be on the relay in the prelims.
U.S. has the slight lead in the third leg of this four-man event. Freddie Bousquet has taken over the lead, though, for France. Fastest relay split in history in the prelims for Bousquet. He swam at Auburn. And then you've got Cullen Jones, who swam on the prelim relay and earned his spot in this final. But France has taken the lead up there in lane 5 over the United States. Alain Bernard awaits as the anchor guy, and Jason Lezak is going to have to make up some ground on Alain Bernard, who stands 6'5" and can absolutely fly.
I just don't think they can do it, Dan. I mean, Jason Lezak has been there how many times in his career has he anchored this free relay and medley relay, but I just don't think he can do it. He's trying to ride that wave as much as possible.
Bernard is pulling away from him. Lezak,
the world record,
a three-time Olympian. World record is absolutely going to be shattered here. The United States trying to hang on to second. They should get the silver medal. Australia is in bronze territory right now, but Lezak is closing a little bit on Bernard. Can the veteran chase him down and pull off a shocker here?
Well, there's no doubt that he's tightening up.
Bernard is losing some ground. Here comes Lezak. Unbelievable at the end. He's done it. The U.S. has done it.
He did it.
A new world record. Phelps' hopes alive. .606 split for Lezak. What a clutch, fast swim when they needed it. Who's talking now? Stunned.
I think they need to use another word other than smash. Wow. That might be the most incredible relay split I've ever seen in my entire life. 46 flat. Not only was that the fastest in history, it blew away the fastest in history. And I just can't believe it. I just cannot believe Jason Lezak just did that. 46 flat.
And no one rooting harder than Michael Phelps, who keeps alive his hopes of 8 gold medals, which has never been done in a single games. He can't believe it. Team captain Jason Lezak, 3-time Olympian, American record holder in the 100 free, just raced the biggest Olympic race of his career, no doubt. He smashed the world record, 3:08.24. 8/100ths of a second was the difference as Jason Lezak roared down the stretch to give the U.S. the gold.
Yeah, I know you'd like to thank you. Don't stand, but lean a little bit closer. See, roses really